Now we're going to start with the frontal lobe. So this part up here, front part of your brain, it really starts growing age 3, 4 is when it's really starting to come online. It's the last major area of the brain to really fully develop. And it's sort of a control center. So when I talk to the kindergartners and the first graders and stuff, we talk about this is the president of your brain. This is the part that's in charge of the rest of your brain. It tells you what to do, when to do it. Things like impulse control, attention, getting organized, staying on task. All those things that your little kindergartners, first graders, second graders are learning to do. Now, gender-wise, which gender do you think is a little bit ahead in that part? Girls. They're about 1.5 to 2 years ahead in the boys. If you go to most kindergarten classrooms, the girls look pretty, their hair's nice, they're sitting still, and the teacher says it's carpet time. They zip right over the carpet, and they're all sitting nice, and they raise their hands. What are most of the boys doing? Touching, swirling around, grabbing different things, their hair's sticking out all over the place, not nearly as focused as the girls. And that's primarily your frontal lobe that's helping us with impulse control. And the research study that I love to decide is the marshmallow test, which was done back in the 50s. And what they did was they took preschoolers into a room, and the psychologist would have a marshmallow. And the psychologist would say, you can have this marshmallow. Now, I'm going to leave the room for 10 minutes, and they showed them the clock. And if you can wait to eat it, when I come back in 10 minutes, if you don't eat it, I'll give you 4 more. You get 4 more marshmallows if you don't eat it in 10 minutes. Okay? So they proceeded with this research. Now, what do you think they found?
Boys are
I haven't seen any, they didn't break it down by gender, but you're on the right track. It basically worked out to thirds. A third of the kids ate it immediately. They just chucked it down. Didn't even wait for the lady to leave, right? They were just, right? And then they had to sit there the next 10 minutes and get nothing more. So that's about a third of them. Another third of the kids tried to wait. And they're the funniest ones. They actually filmed them. And these are the kids who are like sitting there, sitting on their hands, and they're touching it, and they're picking it up. There's a kid that licks it, right? And they're trying so hard not to eat it. But after 5 minutes, 7 minutes, guess what? They chuck it down, okay? Now, another third could wait. And in my mind, those are probably the girls. And they just sat there. And they showed videos of them. And they looked out the window, and they just sat there and waited politely. 10 minutes later, she came back, and they got the marshmallows. Okay? So, came out to thirds. Now, the question was, what will happen to these kids? And they followed them 20 years later to see what happened. And what do you think they found by group? For academic attainment, marital satisfaction, job accomplishment, what do you think they found for each of the groups?
spontaneous ones are the happiest.
Actually, no, it was the opposite. The kids who ate it right away fared the worst. They had the lower academic achievements, lower satisfaction with employment, family life. The kids who could wait fared much better. So they were much higher. And the kids in the middle were sort of doing better. Right? So the ability to control your impulses, to stop, control yourself, control your desires, and wait for a bigger goal. To be able to sustain your motivation, to wait for the bigger goal, put off the impulse, put off the desire, and the delayed gratification. So each of your kids, if you think about your kids, especially those of you who have more than one, it always helps me to think, well, do you have the kid that would wait? Do you have the kid in the middle? Or do you have one of the kids that would just chuck it right down? And the rule of thumb being, and we'll talk about behavior management, if you've got the kid who will just eat it, they need more structure. So when we get to the bowl, those kids need a bigger bowl. They need more structure. Because if you don't, they're just going to run by their impulses. They're just going to let them run loose. If you have one of the kids that would wait instantly, would just sit there and wait. If you come down too hard on that kid, what happens to them? You smush it. They're already self-governing. They already control their impulses. So they don't need as big a bowl. So you got to think about what's your kid. Would they eat the marshmallow or would they wait? Some of the other questions they asked for that research study that are just sort of fun. The kids that waited, they asked them, how did you wait? Like, what was going on in your head? What do you think they found? The ones who could wait.
They're imagining the outcome of it.
They were thinking about goals, and they also were just thinking of other things. They were able to distract themselves. They were able to think about their play dates or how lovely the weather was or whatever. They didn't think about the marshmallow. The group in the middle, guess what they were thinking about? Marshmallow. They couldn't stop thinking about the marshmallow. They wouldn't eat it, right? Even though they were told they waited. And they knew if they get more of it, they couldn't stop thinking. They were obsessing about the marshmallow. And so that's a great strategy for kids. Sometimes you just want to help them get their mind off. Get their mind off of what they're worried about or thinking about and move on to something else.
How old were these kids again?
They were like preschoolers.
They
Like
were
4-year-olds.
preschoolers.
Yeah, they're 4-year-olds. Anyway, frontal lobe, sort of know what your kids are. Okay? What's their ability to control their impulses? Again, 1.5 to 2 years ahead. Girls for boys, age 4 or 5, this thing really takes off, really is expanding and developing. By 3rd grade, 4th grade, whatever, pretty good frontal lobe. I'm going to have that thing working. The image I liked, remember the HO cars, Hot Wheel cars? There you have some, and the little yellow track. And the track, now the track you put together. And so when you first got your first track, it was usually like an oval. That was about all you could make. And it was just the cars would go around an oval. Then, when you really got into it, if you were into it more, Santa Claus would come and bring you more track. Right? And the big one, when I was a kid anyway, was the loop-the-loop. You could make the loop-the-loop and get the car to work and go around the loop. That was pretty cool. But when you got the new track, you had your oval already set up. So that's sort of like the 3rd or 4th grader frontal lobe. It's like that little oval track with cars going around. Now I'm going to make this really cool track. I've got this new track. I have to take the oval apart and start integrating new parts and making my loop and all this stuff. Now, in the middle of building it, if I ran a car down the track, what's going to happen? It's going to crash. It's going to fall off, right? And that's the middle school brain. So the middle school frontal lobe starts undergoing massive transformation. It just shows incredible growth. By the time you're 25, it will be double in size. So it actually thickens the branches of the neurons. They get more fingers, they get more arms, they branch, like a big full Christmas tree. So by the time you're 25, it's going to be double in size. And while, especially 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, while that's happening, guess how they act? Like preschoolers again. And they're forgetful, and they struggle with organization, and they do things without thinking about it. One day in a class, I was talking about the frontal lobe of some 7th graders, and I'll never forget this. There was a child in class is now, he's either at Stanford or out of Princeton or something. I just heard about it. And he had this big old pencil shaped like a baseball. It was St. Louis Cardinals, and I was from St. Louis, so I really recognize it. But you know those baseball bat pens you get at the Rockies game or whatever? He had this big whopper pencil. And he was sitting in the class as I'm talking about their frontal lobes and about how they're expanding, and you don't make good choices when your frontal lobes are growing. And the kid's sitting there like this, doing this, right? And just as I finished, he's looking at it, pops himself in the head, and he looks up with this like shock and awe. And I just turned to him and I said, well, what did you expect to happen? I mean, think about it. You're sitting there popping something in your head. When do you think that would happen? Right? Now, was he thinking about it? No. Right? The most common phrase you'll hear from middle schoolers, especially boys, is when you ask them, why did you do that? Guess what they say? I don't know. And then the other one is, it was an accident. Right? To which I often like to say, no, there's no such thing as accidents. You failed to use your frontal lobe. You don't know because you didn't stop and think first. But that's what's going on with the frontal lobe in middle school. For girls around 8th and 8th grade, it really is a lean, mean fighting machine for boys again. You usually see a big jump around the end of sophomore years. As your guys get older, you're going to see a big jump around the end of sophomore years for boys, around the end of 8th grade for the girls. So that's frontal lobe piece.